The following episode contains language and descriptions of violence and self-harm. It may not be appropriate for all listeners, but it was my life. Discretion is advised. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Roll Call with Chappie. Doing this a little different. We're recording on the weekend because I have a special guest that flew in all the way from Mexico. So introduce yourself to everybody, Kelsey, and let them know like your Instagram handles and how they can find you.
Yes, thank you so much, Peter. I'm so excited to be here. Great flight getting here. Always happy to come to the dry heat, which I'm loving.
Not bad.
So yeah, my name is Kelsey. I run the New Feminine on Instagram. It's Kelsey Sophia or newfeminine.co. It's basically where boss babe meets housewife type vibe. So
Okay.
It's pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
And let's get into before. So how did you get there? Let me know the fans how you grew up. What was it like growing up as a child for you?
Yeah, so good question. Basically, I grew up with a single mom. She was 17.
From where? Canada?
Canada,
Okay.
Ottawa. Dad was like fresh out of jail. She actually didn't even know that she was pregnant. She had cancer, and that's how she found out that she was pregnant. She ended up getting chemo, all the things.
Wow.
And yeah, I basically grew up like with a single mom, single teenage mom. So she worked multiple jobs. I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood. Most of it, I was like, the ones that I do remember, I was kind of alone, walking around my place, doing my own thing. But she was like a great mom, super loving. And surprisingly, like despite my circumstances, I ended up having like a really beautiful childhood. Like, you know, she gave me as much as she could. Even though we had like virtually nothing, I was always known as that girl with like the nicest clothes in school.
Yeah.
Like I was known as that. So yeah, that was kind of how it started. And then I lost her at 17 and a lot kind of started changing from there.
You lost her at 17?
Yeah. So
How was that? Do you want to talk about that at all? Can you please?
yeah, for sure. So that was like a very pivotal moment in my life. And to be honest, like I don't know that I even processed it for like 12 years afterwards.
12 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
Yep.
It's a very long time.
I know that number 12.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very long time. Yeah, she was my best friend, right? Like my entire identity was around my mom. And the thing is, because she had me so young at 17, she had like a lot of like control and fears around losing me and things like that. So I never really learned how to make my own decisions or live my own life. It was really like my mom being like, yes, you can do this. No, you can't do this. To the point where in high school, I would literally like call my parents and be like, can I have a beer at a party?
Really?
And they would laugh. And my stepdad would be like, you can have two because like, how are you so amazing?
Yeah.
You know? And so when she died, it was like really intense because I literally spent 12 years almost being like a fuck up. I can swear, right? Because then it's like I had to learn all those mistakes that I should have learned in high school, right? And I had to learn them as an adult. So that was really challenging.
Yeah.
And then losing her was really challenging too, right? And I don't know if you've ever experienced like very like death, but it's a really like interesting process because you know they're gone, and then you physically like actually start to miss them probably around like 3 or 4 months in. You're like, wow, I physically miss this person. So it's like you have to like grieve their death, but then you like actually miss their presence.
Multiple times, yeah. Yeah,
and it's so intense. And I remember like probably like a year after she died, I was like driving home from a night shift. I used to work at the hospital. I'm driving home from a night shift. And it was maybe 1 or 2 years after. So I'm like 19, 20. I'm making good money at the hospital. And I lived like out in the boonies. I'd bought like a beautiful house with like a tennis court and like 2.5 acres with horses and all the things. Yeah, I did that with the money that I got from her. And I had to pull over after my shift because it like finally hit me that I was never going to see her again. And that was like, I was just like heaving in the car. It was so intense. And that's kind of when I think my heart closed and so many things just happened in that moment.
Okay, let's get into that. Please.
Yeah.
Keep going. I can listen to you talk about this stuff forever.
Yeah. Well, like those 12 years were...
I want to get into the spiritual stuff because you're like a very, very spiritual person. Like you've tried to teach me a little bit of that stuff, and I know I for sure need to learn more, so for sure my viewers can get a ton from that. So I want to get to all your like spiritualness and all that stuff.
Yeah,
so keep
totally.
going.
Yeah, I think that I was like really open to love before that. And I was in a relationship at that point too. And I feel like that was a moment when I really just like closed my heart and I became really afraid of like deep love, and I was just like really afraid to lose someone again, you know, because then after that I feel like I kind of became a little bit cold-hearted. I was still in a relationship, but it was like we had been together from basically like right before my mom died. We had the house, we had our dogs, we had all these things, and I was there because it was safe, it was easy, his family loved me, right? There wasn't really like love, like that's not fair. Like there was love in the capacity that I had at that time. And I was going to school and I was like building my life. But it's been like truly a really intense journey, because I don't think that we understand energetically like how our hearts work and how love works and things like this, but we go through something like this where you lose like she was my best friend. Like I loved her more than anything in the world. And I'm like super emotional, but it's like when you experience that type of loss, there's gonna be fears of having this happen again. So you like shut down. So those like fuck boys that everybody like talks shit about on Instagram, like these are just like really wounded men that are really afraid of being hurt again. So that was me. So I kept like everybody at a distance. I was like top of my class as a respiratory therapist, like 90, 95s, which like is a big deal, because in that program we start 40, we graduate 8. Like everybody fails. I'm like 90s. So I would like, that's how I deal with stress and things like that. It's like, oh, I'm stressed out and I feel like shit. Let me like work so much and just like avoid it and repress it. And I did that for years. So it's like truly only the last year that I've been finally like opening my heart again and allowing people back in and trusting like life, God, love, and truly like just adopting this, I don't know, this idea that like I'd rather like love and lose than like not love at all. But which, yeah, even that came from something.
How did you get into all this stuff? Were you always like kind of spiritual on this side, or?
Yeah, so I've always been like really weird. I've always been really weird. I was always like that girl, like I was always bullied in school, like all the time. Like I remember I was like 5 years old. I had this like jacket that I absolutely adored with like fur all around it. And we're walking and I'm like, I love it and I feel so cute. And then like all these kids just start like yelling at me and making fun of me. And people have told me that it's because you just shine really bright, you know? And so I was always kind of weird. I never really had a lot of friends because, again, like the depth that I have now, I had as a little girl as well. Most people are super surface level.
For sure.
So yeah, I was always like that. And then when I was 16, my mom gave me the book, A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And I went through like a huge awakening at that point. I know a lot of people started waking up in like 2009, 2011, 2012. So mine, I don't know when that was, 16, yeah, I was like 2008, but I was like fully now awake. I was like practicing mindfulness. I was like aware of like these energies. Interestingly enough though, I didn't finish that book. There was like maybe one chapter left. I tried to reread it again, ended at the exact same spot, and then maybe like 6 months ago, finally finished it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't ready.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So when you're, and I want to backtrack a little bit, once your mom passed, where did you go like live and stay? Were you just completely on your own?
No,
right
so
away?
yeah, like so I was living with a month.
Was your dad still around at all, or?
No, so my real dad was not, but my stepdad was. Like I had moved out like a month before, like 17-year-old girl. I moved in with my like 24-year-old boyfriend, whatever. Okay.
Yeah. Those dudes are cool.
Oh,
those
yeah.
24-year-old dudes that do that stuff.
Those are great guys, you know.
Yeah.
A real catch.
Those are the guys that dudes earn political ink off of, right there.
Yeah. So ran away. So grateful I did that, honestly, because that month my mom and I had like the absolute best relationship from being out of the house, like under like her, you know what I mean, under her control. So we actually like connected really deeply. So I was living with him, and then basically crazy things happened. Like, you know, a lot of money comes from a death. The money went to like my stepdad instead of my grandpa, the money went to my grandpa instead of my stepdad. My grandpa, being like a man who never had a lot of money, decided that he wants to keep the money, that he deserves it, apparently for being a great dad, which truly, like, there were a lot of issues there. So he gives me $10,000, and my stepdad gets a bunch of money, buys like $50,000 truck, all these things, and tells me he's gonna give me $50,000. Like, so here I am, like 17. Everyone around me takes all this money, and
all
I'm
I
like,
keep thinking of is that. Do you ever watch Family Guy?
Yeah.
Where Stewie's like, got my money, got my money, got my money.
It's just like crazy. Like, you think when your mom dies, you're going to have like something to set you up. But my grandpa's like, no, you got this guy to take care of you. And I'm like, he's kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah. Your mom's there, but here's this 24-year-old creep.
You know? So it's like.
Well, luckily you made it out of that without ending up in a trash bag or something. Seriously.
He's actually, I don't want to say, I'm sure a great guy, but
hopefully he's listening to this.
Yeah. So anyways, I got a little bit of money. My dad like put a down payment on a house. This is a great story because anyways, dated this guy for like years, ended up going bankrupt afterwards, losing everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just did not
God
go well.
God wasn't blessed in that situation with you too, right?
Yeah. I was just like, what is going on here, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up moving in with him, which was like a nightmare.
For sure, I can tell.
But again, like, I think that when we're young, you just like, I was very codependent, right? Like, I
Yeah.
wanted somebody. I was like afraid of being, like, I wanted to marry him, and I was like crazy because it was just like, I just wanted someone, you know? So, and his family was so good. They loved me so much. They paid for a lot of my school. Like, I had stopped going to school for a few years. I was working in the hospital as like a porter, so just like transporting patients. And I have like the funniest stories about that. Like, honestly, like, yeah, there were moments of me like 2 a.m. with like a person in a body bag that I have to like move into the morgue. There's like
No way.
some security guard like sitting outside on his phone, doesn't want to help some like tiny, like 5'6", and at that time I was like tiny, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like literally standing over this like massive
People don't
200
realize how heavy bodies are.
Oh my
until
gosh.
You have to move one.
I'm like literally standing like 200 pounds, and I'm like trying to move this like dead corpse onto like a tray. The tray falls, the body falls. It's just like so many stories like that, which were just really fun. And then I went back to school, became a respiratory therapist. And
And then what happened to Pops?
So the real dad, basically he was like,
which is it's crazy. Like, you know, I've just got new to the whole faith in God thing. And like, I've never ever like talked to someone on Instagram and then like literally weeks later was like, yo, come on, do my podcast. I don't know really too much about you. I just had a good feeling about this. And then the second you get there, you're like, oh, my dad was in prison, all this. And I'm like, dude, how crazy are the similarities? I was like, this is going to be awesome. So I want to get into that, please.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my dad was like a beautiful man, like super attractive, super hardworking, super sweet. Like even my grandpa was like best guy I've ever met.
Better looking than me?
I don't know about that.
Just kidding.
Good looking guy. He looked like me, you know. But his dad was a drug addict, or dad was an alcoholic, abusive. So of course he was also like drug addict. And I guess like, I don't know that necessarily abusive, but there are like police reports of him like coming home, like cutting my mom's boots off like with a knife to try to get money and stuff like that. Yeah, like with the drugs, right? But with me, he was like best dad. I have all these photos like us like covered in teddies. He was so good. And I guess when I was like 3 or so, my mom put a restraining order against him and we didn't see them anymore. Yeah. And apparently he tried to come back into my life when I was 8. Again, she didn't let him. And then when I was 16, we found out that he had HIV. And I remember my step-parent, like my stepdad and my mom took me out on a run because we'd always go running together. And we're on the run, and then they were just like, can we talk to you about this thing? Like, your dad's family contacted us. He has HIV. This was actually a week before my mom died.
No way.
Yes, yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know? And then so a week before my mom died, his family, his mom and his sister came back into our life, which was wild. And then a week later they died. And I remember calling my grandma Darlene, and she was like bawling, like, what do you mean? Like, I just came back into your life and now your mom is gone. It was very intense, these things made me believe in God more than anything. Like, what are the odds that...
And a lot of people do that the opposite.
Yeah.
They'll go through stuff like that. Like, that's what I did. When I lost my cousin, I was like, there's no way God would take my cousin's life. And I gave up on God for a long time. So let's hear that. Like, how did you get into looking at like, that's a God thing rather than like doing like me and like most of the other people doing, like, God's not real. If he did, like, why would he do this? That's crazy that you would do that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, and I'm just...
A lot of people literally lose both their parents, and like it could spin the rest of their life out of control and use that as, like, I would probably do that. No joke.
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of person I am. I was always the kind of guy that would like look for an excuse, and then once I found the excuse, I was going to wreak havoc, you know? So it's amazing that you've had that and like getting to where you are now. So I would like to hear about that though.
Honestly though, like, I got to give a lot of that to like my mom. Like, she did like a really incredible job at raising me. You know what I mean? Like, she really did. Like, and I've been really hard on her over the years, because that's kind of like my like defense mechanism. Like, oh, you hurt me, like now I hate you type thing.
Yeah.
So for years I was like really angry with her, but she did a really great job at raising me. And I always believed in God, but I was like very anti-religion. But the day my mom died, I was in the shower, and like anyone who's experienced like heartbreak or whatever, like it literally feels like you're cracked open. And like when the doctor told me my mom died, I remember like it literally felt like my heart, like just this hole, and like I lost everything. And I'm in the shower that night, and the hole is so big, and I just felt like the most overwhelming presence of like love and care and like God. Like, it was like truly like that night that I was like, I found God tonight. It was so wild.
Wow.
Like, yeah. And I knew, I'm like, this is God. And if we're truly, like, if I'm being really honest with myself, like, I would not be where I am without my mom dying, because she had a lot of control over my life. I spent the last 12 years trying to break free from like this like box that she wanted me to fit in, because I'm very like very different from her. I'm like the rest of my family, like black sheep of the family. And even though she was dead, I was like still living under her, like looking for like love and acceptance from her, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, when you look in hindsight, you're like, yeah, that had to happen. And I don't believe in good or bad. Like everything just is. Like someone could like fall off a chair there. We get to determine like, was that good? Was that bad? It just is. Like things happen.
Okay.
And you know, people have told me like, oh, it's so terrible. You lost both your parents, things like that. It's like, who says it's terrible? You know, like there's this like Chinese proverb, I think, where the man, like, I don't know all the details. So anyone who's listening, like, please don't like come on, like
DM her and smoke her if
like,
she gets this one
this
wrong.
This isn't right, you know? So
Kelsey Sophia on Instagram.
Yeah, like just like, you know, chill in the comments, guys. We all know this story, but like, it's just like a very basic story where like the kid breaks his leg and everyone's like, oh my gosh, like this is so terrible. And the dad's like, I don't know. And then like a few days later, the military comes and they're here to grab like all the boys to go to war, but the son can't go because his like leg is broken. There's this entire story, you know? So everything just is.
Okay.
But yeah, that's like really the moment where I found God.
Cool. So where did you get out of this little cool relationship you had with the 24-year-old, and where'd you head after that?
Yeah. So this is like, we're going deep here. So the whole time I was with him, I like had a wandering eye, and I'm like the most monogamous woman there is. Like if I love my man, like I'm like, it's like I don't even see anybody else. But with him, like right off the bat, I'd have crushes on like everybody. Like,
really?
I would never do anything. Like that's just not me. But I always had a crush on somebody else. And I ended up having a crush on who is now my ex-husband. And it was like for 6 months, like there was just something about him, and he was like this very big masculine man. And I always like had a tendency of dating like really nerdy guys because I'm pretty nerdy. So here was this like big hot hunk, you know, who had like a bit of an interest in me. And I think it was like my escape from my like shitty relationship. Mm-hmm. So then we started talking and I was still in the relationship. And like 2 days later, I broke up with him. Cause I'm like, again, like, I'm like, I can't be dishonest. I'm like not, you know? So we broke up. And then I started seeing him, and that's just like a whole other story. And at that point I was about to graduate as a respiratory therapist. So that was like a lot of freedom for me, right? So I was like, that's a great job. Like you're making like $35 an hour. I'd been in the hospital for years, you know, so everybody knew me in the hospital. Everyone knew my mom. Everyone knew my stepdad. He was like the boss of like the respiratory therapist. I worked my ass off to like win both jobs at both hospitals in Ottawa. So like,
really?
Yeah, like we were two of us who won both jobs. There was only 2 positions at both hospitals. And this other guy and I, we won both. Like I did everything to get these jobs. It was like my dream job.
Okay.
Then I just started working, got married shortly after, had a baby a year later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what?
Then
how long did you stay? I want to get into like when you left the respiratory therapist stuff.
Yeah, so I actually left during my mat leave.
How long did you do that for? A few years?
Yeah, a few years. So when I was pregnant, so again, I've always been like different with my belief system and stuff like that. And I worked in like labor and delivery. I worked all over the hospital. I've had like so many people like die in my hands. I've had like little like babies like literally this big. Oh. You can like see through them into their heart. And I'm the one like making sure that they breathe while like mom is like, you know,
that's gotta be tough too.
It's like really intense because again, I've always dealt with stress so well, and I thought I was fine. Like, and I'm like cool as a cucumber. Like it would be like 2 a.m, person's like dead in front of me. We're trying to reanimate them. Anesthesia comes in, all the things, and I'm just like so chill, smiling, laughing, doing my thing, whatever.
Just meditating and shit.
Yeah, just like super chill. And I remember like these doctors would look at me like, what is wrong with this girl? Because I just like have always like internalized stress. And then when I was pregnant, my son is like 22 weeks old, and I'm getting contractions and all these things, and like stress shows in the body. So they put me off work until I was 36 weeks. But then with mat leave and things like that in Canada, if you want to get like the full year of mat leave, which Canada is great for that, I got to give it to, I had to go back to work. So at 36 weeks, I'm like super pregnant, go back to work. And I'm like, I work a lot. I start doing like 12-hour shifts, 6 days in a row. Jeez. Like I'm just like a beast at these things, like night shifts too, boom, boom, boom. And now it's like Christmas Eve and I'm like up in bed, contractions again. And my midwife was like, no, you're going to stop work until you're 40 weeks. Basically have my kid, best like experience of my life. I gave birth fully naturally, despite like all my coworkers and my stepdad and everyone telling me that I was an idiot.
Why fully natural?
I'm just like, a woman's body is literally designed to give birth. You have like a host of like hormones that are actually released. If you take 0 medications, there's a ton of hormones that are released during childbirth to allow you to manage the pain. In the hospital, it's like a business of being born. They inject you with something to increase the contractions, not because they care about you, but because they want your bed free.
They want you in and out.
Yeah, because if they do it within 24 hours, you get a beautiful bonus, you know? So they're like pushing women. So I like birthed for like hours completely alone, like literally no one in my house. I'm like eating cake. I'm eating like a whole bag of like Miss Vicky's. No one knows that I'm in labor. I'm like bouncing on my ball. I'm watching America's Sweethearts. I've got my sunglasses on to like for the like melatonin production. I've got the curtains all over all day. I told one of my girlfriends, I said, I'm probably going to give birth today, probably around 8 p.m. Didn't even tell my husband at the time. He comes home and he's like, I fucking knew you were up to something.
No
like,
way.
Yeah, he's like, I could feel it, but he's like, you didn't tell me, and I'm like, I just wanted you to go to
You're
work.
Like, I'm busy, dude.
Yeah, like,
yeah,
like I don't have time for this.
Baby out of here.
Yeah, and so something shifted after that, right? Like it was like the most beautiful experience of my life. And basically, when my son was 6 weeks, it's so funny. Anyone who's a woman listening, like, nothing changes for the dad, okay? Like your life stays the same. Boys' night stay. I'm looking at Robin. She's like, yeah, boys' night stays the same. Everything stays the same. Meanwhile, you're like literally like feeding this like tiny little human every 2 hours. So I like camped out on my couch. We had like the L couch with an ottoman. So I was like camping out with my kid. I'm watching my shows, feeding him, doing my thing for 6 weeks. And at one point, like, you know, my ex-husband comes in, walks in, and I just had this, like, I want to, like, punch him in the back of the head.
Shut up.
I was so mad. I'm like, and I've always been good at communication. I'm like, I hate you right now. And
Shut up.
He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, your life hasn't changed. You got Friday night boys' nights. You're going to work. You're going to the gym. Everything's the same. I'm like, I'm going crazy. I'm like, my body's not the same. Like, I'm usually, like, ripped, you know? I'm like, I'm not working. I'm not doing anything. He's like, okay. He's like, what do you need to do? I'm like, I need to start counting my macros. He's like, okay, cool. Start counting my macros.
That's the conclusion you came up with.
Like, I gotta start. And he's like, what else? I'm like, I need to become a personal trainer. Because I'd been bodybuilding since I was like 17.
Okay.
So I started studying for personal training. That night we paid for like the ACE personal trainer. And then I started like studying in the middle of the night. Like my son would wake up to eat. It would be like 2 a.m. and I'd be studying my books. And I started my Instagram and I started building my Instagram as a personal trainer when my son was 6 weeks old.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm listening to the podcast. We've got like, and he just let me do my own thing.
Any idea like where you want to go at this point with your life?
Yeah,
or,
like I knew, I was getting visions of myself, like speaking on stages with like hundreds of thousands of people, like Tony Robbins big type thing.
Okay.
I'm like, but it started with that. I was listening to the podcast. I started like, you know, following these other people. I'd like write on the board the things that I want, right? So like, you know, I'm listening to a podcast over and over, and this girl, Angie Lee, she's like promoting her big event, Pays to be Brave, in San Diego. And I'm like, I just get this crazy feeling from God, like you have to go there. So I write it down, Pays to be Brave. I write down the dates. I'm on mat leave. You know, my ex doesn't make that much money, but he was always like, yo, if you think we're gonna do it, like we're gonna do it. You know,
Okay.
He's like, let's do it. So I write it. I'm manifesting all the things, and probably a few months later, and I think it's important that I talk about this because what I did, and this is what everyone listening can do, I basically like wrote out the things that I wanted, okay? So I literally wrote out, like, I'm gonna be on Angeli's podcast. I'm gonna work with like, I'm dropping some names that you guys can go look up on Instagram. These were women that like I adored, like Lori Harder, Kayla Kraft. I put all of their names on there.
Lori Harder's right here.
Oh yeah?
Yes, she's Scottsdale.
Oh my goodness, okay, I absolutely adore her. So I had all these names here, and I'm like saying like I'm gonna go to Pays to be Brave, and I like paint the vision, and then I recorded it and I listened to it every single night. And at this point, I wasn't like, I hadn't studied the unconscious mind, but you know, all of us entrepreneurs know that like the unconscious mind is where like, you know, the conscious mind is the goal setter, the unconscious mind is the goal getter. So I start every single night listening to this vision before bed. Okay, next thing you know, Angeli is doing this like free giveaway for a ticket. I'm in the car, I'm trying to go live, I'm trying to make the video, I'm trying to do something. And then literally my ex, he like pulls over and he's like, what do we need to do? And I just start bawling, and I'm like, I have to go to San Diego. I have to like request to be in her group. And I'm like, everyone else was just recording these videos, like recording, re-recording, whatever. I'm like, I'm gonna go live in the group. Like I'm gonna stand out, you know? Requesting access to the group, I can't get in. It's like 8 p.m. There's like only a few hours left to enter the contest. I have no idea what to do. I look at my phone, I get a random message from Angie Lee. And she literally sends me a message, said, hey, I don't know if you were gonna enter the contest or whatever, but I wanna gift you 2 free tickets to this event. And I'm like, I was like bawling my eyes out. It was crazy. Like I never entered the contest, never done anything.
Oh.
Shortly after that, like I go on Kayla Craft's live. She brings me onto the live, messages me after, brings me on her isogenics team. This is Kayla Craft. Now when I'm in San Diego, haven't met Lori Harder yet, and I'm walking down the hall. I've got my ex, my kid, and normally everyone would be like in the conference hall, but because we have to bring my son to like the daycare, we have to go past the conference hall, and I'm just out loud living in the hotel like a crazy person. I'm like, I'm gonna meet Lori Harder. I'm gonna meet Lori Harder. I'm gonna meet Lori Harder. We literally turn the corner. Lori and Chris are sitting completely by themselves. Everyone else is in the conference hall.
What
I
are the
just
chances?
like break down. They meet all of us, photos, they meet my boy, and she like I'm telling her all of this crying, and she holds me by the hands and she's like, you did this. And I was like,
Yeah.
and then that trip changed everything, because I did breath work on the rooftop of San Diego. And at this point, plot twist, I was wearing hijab. I was like Muslim and all the things. I was wearing hijab. I'm doing, breath work on the top. I've never done breath work before. Doing it on the top of San Diego. I'm like living my dream. I've got like my fake lashes, my hijab on, lying, like looking at this beautiful sun. And I have the craziest jaw tension ever. And I go and ask the instructor, I'm like, what does jaw tension mean when you're doing it? She's like, there's something that you're not like speaking, like being honest about. And immediately it was like, I'm not Muslim. Like immediately I'm looking at her and it's like, I'm not Muslim. So now I'm going home and I'm like shaking in the car on the way home from the airport. And my ex is like, what the hell is wrong with you? Because I'm like,
You're about to find out, homie.
yeah, I'm like, I'm about to drop this bomb on you and our life is about to change.
You want to eat some food first before you catch this news?
Yeah. And it was crazy. And like, that was it. Like,
So how'd you break that news to him?
I remember I was like shaking, doing dishes. And then he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And I turn around and I'm like, I don't know how to say this, And I'm like, I don't want to wear hijab. And it was like an instant reaction from him. And I don't want to villainize him at all, but it was like an instant reaction, like, cool, then we're not going to be together. Like, no, we're getting divorced.
I don't even think people know. Definitely my viewers don't even know what that is, probably, because I didn't even know what the term is. But that's
it's like the veil that you wear around your head and your hair. So for 3 years, I didn't, like, no one saw my hair, no one saw anything. If I went swimming, I was like literally in long sleeves. No one saw my arms, no one saw anything. And there's a lot of like, I know people who wear it and there's so much freedom in it. I truly believe like, as human beings, like we're all meant to be like very unique expressions of God. And so it's so interesting. Like one of my clients right now, she just started wearing hijab. She's like Caucasian, convert, just started wearing hijab. And my clients always mirror things to me. And as she's expanding in this for her, I'm like now posting more photos of myself online. And it's so beautiful because again, God is just here to expand. If we all expanded in this direction, that's not expansion. Like there really does need to be an array of different people and things like that. But that wasn't my truth,
For sure.
And I very much did it in order to be loved.
Okay.
So
how do you take that? And then what was next after that?
Well, we like talked about it, and he's like, I'm not going to stay with you because he's like, you told me you were something, and now you're not. And so it's like a very deep betrayal for him.
He didn't tell you, like, you didn't say that you were Muslim at first, right? Did you convert with him?
We started dating. We started dating at the same time that I started becoming friends.
Don't they have to like get their significant others to convert or something? No?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
You can marry a Christian girl, and like, okay. I love God. But I was always like super against Christianity. And Islam, I do believe, is like very deeply spiritual, and God speaks to me through like metaphors and things like that. But just go look at like a church, like, and especially churches like in Europe, some of them are just like plain like walls. Mm-hmm. Go look at a mosque. It's like anyone can Google any mosque anywhere in the world. It's like the most intricate, beautiful, artistic creation that there is. And that is a beautiful reflection of how they see God. And they see God in a truly incredible way. And I do think that like the religion is hijacked, just as I think all things in this world get hijacked by the enemy or the other side or whatever you want to call it, right? So there's so much beauty, there's so much depth. Like one of the quotes here is like from this like Imam Ali, and it's like, I sat at the gate of my heart and let no one except God in. And it's just so beautiful. And he would have these like, him and his wife Fatima, who was like the prophet's daughter, like they had the most beautiful marriage. Like he's like, I will put my head in the sand before like yelling at my wife, And like he would always say these things like, I'll put my hands in the dirt and I'll feel more connected to the earth than to the people. And like things like that just like took me away, It's just so much depth, so much spirituality. And it's almost like what I truly needed at that point, because it brought me so close to God. And I do, on some level, like, and from following my Instagram, I am into like a bit more like traditional values, right? So, and I do love like the traditional values of like man and wife and like husband and wife, right? Like I don't necessarily buy into this whole like, oh, you should look super hot to go out clubbing, but then look like a slob at home with your man. No, like you wear the booty shorts with your man and you look like kind of good when you go out. Like what are we, you know, who are we trying to look beautiful for, right? So there was a lot of that stuff that I was already just like that. Like even when I was 17 with that guy, I never in 4 years cooked the same dinner. Not once.
No way.
Yeah, like I literally, like whatever he wanted, like I would like spend like
You good at cooking too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's like good to know.
Just curious.
Yeah. Really good.
We're still on the air here? Yeah. I'm still doing a podcast. Robin's still right there. Anyway, just kidding. Grab one of these other microphones. Shit. All right. So how did he take that? And then where did you go after you guys split up there?
Yeah. So like I ended up like I tried to keep wearing it for a month. He would not be seen out in public with me. He was
No
like
way.
He stopped sleeping with me completely. Stopped sleeping in the same bed. Like just like completely detached from me. Yeah. It was really hard.
Wow.
Yeah. And then my stepdad was like begging him, like, we're going on a trip in November, like at my birthday for mine and like my step uncle's birthday. And he was like begging him, like, please come with us, you know? And I was still wearing hijab and I told him, I'm like, I'm going to take it off. And he's like, fine, take it off when we're on vacation. And anyways, I took it off on my birthday and he was like, he's not a drinker, like at all. He drank the whole trip. He was just like, again, like there was nothing left between us.
Yeah.
And then I started being attacked. Like I had like almost 9,000 followers on Instagram and most of it was Muslim followers. I started getting messages like, you're a whore, like all these crazy things. Yeah, there was some beautiful, like again, everything is a balance, right? There were beautiful messages like, good for you, do what you feel like you need to do. But then also just like, yeah, really awful messages. It went really like south from there. And by Christmas again, you keep trying a bit, but it was like we couldn't even like have a conversation. And at one point it was just like, hey, we're done, that's it. And by January we were like literally physically divorced.
Well, and then what were you doing at this point? Were you still working at the hospital?
No. I had quit the hospital on my mat leave. I never went back. I was like building my business. I was working, but it wasn't where I wanted it to be. I was making maybe like $2,000 a month, which is like nothing. And so then a lot started to happen because now I'm like relying solely on my coaching business. And there are moments where I'm like, I remember like, and I talked with this on Instagram recently, I'm like sitting on the floor. I just dropped off my kid at his dad's house. I was breastfeeding them. So he took him for like one day, $19 in my bank account. I go buy like a $9 Domino pizza because I've had like a lot of eating disorders over the years. Buy a $9 pizza, bring it home. I'm alone. My baby's gone. That's like not natural for a mom not to have her baby. $9 left in my account, basically. I'm like eating this pizza and I got a letter in the mail from like the respiratory therapist, like whatever, asking if I want to renew my license. And it was this like crazy moment where I'm like, okay, I can go back to this old life, have a great job, be making like overtime, like $5,000-6,000 a month, you know, like basically you're doing 6 figures. Or I'm like, I can fucking stick to this and keep going and just trust. And again, so here I'm like, again, $10 in my bank account, pizza, and I'm like hot, like after my, like I'm like in great shape, you know, I'm like, are you really gonna down this whole pizza and just like fuck up your body too and everything? And I'm like holding this letter and I'm like, no, like I'm not going back. Like I will not stop at anything to make my dreams a reality. And a week later, I was doing podcasting at that point and I bring on this girl to interview her. She has a massive company. Somebody had mentioned her name beforehand, and this is how God works, okay? Mentioned the name, and then she's on my podcast, and then she's like, oh, you do sales? And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing sales for like, I just started doing sales. She's like, I need someone to do sales for me. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So now I started doing sales for her. What does she do? She allows me to come get like certified as a neuro-linguistic practitioner. I then like go and do my master prac, and then my business just blows up after that.
Neuro-linguistic, what is that?
Programming. So it's all like the unconscious mind. So I don't call myself like a master practitioner of NLP anymore now that I developed my own technique and I teach that. But I did start off being like NLP. So yeah, it's like all understanding of the unconscious mind, language, anyone who's listening to this, who's like really into personal development, most people know what NLP is because it's the way to like get to the root of your unconscious mind. You learn techniques that can like literally shift your entire life. And we know that like, you know, conscious mind is like the tip of the iceberg. Unconscious mind is everything underneath. So truly like 90 to 99% of everything your thoughts, actions, habits, behaviors are unconscious. They're completely unknown to you. Like 90 to 99% of your entire day is just unconscious patterns. And where do these come from? Generally from 0 to 7, or if there's been any other trauma in your life. So if you don't have, you look like anyone who's like listening to this, like look around your entire life. What is it telling you? You know what I mean? It's a mirror. And this is my method, like mirror method. It's like everything that you're looking at. If you don't have the money that you want in your bank account, okay, that's an unconscious belief. Like you are the creator of your entire reality. So if you don't have $1 million in your bank account, it's because you don't believe that you can have $1 million in your bank account. So it's like everything there. And this is when my real deep healing started. When I went through a really like dark night of the soul, really deep awakening after my divorce, and when I started to truly heal like the things that were keeping me small and keeping me as this like little girl that grew up with no money, you know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, this was like huge in the journey and with clients and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did that start kind of taking off then? Because you're doing very well right now, but it's like, even myself, I always wonder, like, how do you get traction at first? How to get going? Was it smooth sailing at first, or?
I posted every single day consistently for the first like 6 months of my business. Like I showed the fuck up.
And it's tough to do that too.
Every day. I did. Andy Frisella had just started his like 75.
What do you know? There's
challenge.
about 8 episodes, and I made a joke last week. I think I've had 7 podcasts now where someone shouted out Andy Frisella. So there goes number 8.
Yeah, there we go.
Every single episode he gets brought up.
Okay, so back then he had just started his 75.
Hard, yep.
Yeah, hard challenge, which I love. Like I was in a Facebook group the other day and people are still doing this. So I'm like, yo, that is great branding and like great marketing. I'm like, good job, buddy. But so all my friends were doing that and I'm like, I have to do things my own way. I'm like, fuck that. I already go to the gym. I'm already like ripped. I already do everything. Like I'm super disciplined. I'm like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post every single day for 75 days. I'm going to post a video for 75 days. And I'm showing up and I'm going through my divorce and I'm moving through it. And I'm being super honest about like screaming in pillows and jaw tension and all the things. And I'm teaching mindset and I'm teaching spirituality. And because for a lot of my business, I was wearing hijab, I did blow up a lot because of that, because these like Muslim women were sharing me and things like that. But so it felt like, and I tell my girls this when I'm teaching them how to get to like 10K per month, it almost feels like nothing is happening. And it's the same thing in weight loss, right? You're like doing all the things, you're meal prepping, you're eating the right food, you're going to the gym. And it's like literally the day that you're like, fuck this, it's not working. The next day you hop on the scale, you drop like 6 pounds, you look shredded. It's like the swoosh effect. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing in business. Like you show up consistently and it's almost like God is like, I'm not going to give you the results until you prove that you're going to actually like push
Stick
past.
It out and go through the tough times.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then it's like, again, I was like doing like 1, 2K, nothing. All of a sudden in May, I hit $6,000.
US?
Canadian. Yeah, he's laughing at me because every time I talk about money, I have to be like.
She says US right afterwards.
I'm like, it's 750 US.
Yeah, US. Right. So I was just making sure we're talking about the same amount of money right there.
Yeah, right there in America.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Canadian, okay, get it right. And we just shifted to US. And in May, it was like 6K. In June, I moved to Toronto. Which was really big. I got driving a BMW. It was really stupid, okay? Because I had like 2
I've been there, trust me.
Yeah, I did like 2 good months, like $6,000, $7,000. Now I'm like a baller. I'm like, get me the BMW, get me the like 25.
When I got in the car, because I had 1 good month and I bought a new car from that on top of that. And
it's like, don't do that. You know what I mean? Don't do that. Like drive the beater. But back then I was really trying to prove that I was good enough. I was still in this really weird paradigm. So I got the like $2,500 condo. You know, it's like a 1-bedroom in Toronto. Mm-hmm. It's like a size of a tin can.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, it's in Toronto. And the BMW, and I start working with I chose the best niche. I was like a dating coach for male entrepreneurs. Okay. My business blew up. Blew up. Yeah. I would have guys on the phone. I'd be like, and I was like, I'm really good at sales, but especially with men, I'd be like, go get your visa. What are we doing? Let's go. Come on. Are we going to do this or what? I'm like, really? You're going to pussy out right now? Go get your visa. And they'd be like, I'm going.
Literally in 2 seconds, probably.
Yeah, it was just crazy.
Okay.
So it blew up. So then June, it was like 9K. By October, I hit 13K.
US.
And you know what though? That was like a huge failure because I was trying to hit 15 grand.
Okay.
And a friend of mine was like, are you like dumb? Like, he's like, the majority of people make like $2,000 a month. He's like, you hit 13K, and he's like, and you're like literally crying because you didn't hit 15 grand.
Yeah.
And I was also invited to speak in LA that month in front of like 100 people. It was huge, you know, and I'd been traveling that whole year, like New York, all over the place. Like my life really was like popping off. People would recognize me like in the streets of Toronto, like, you're that girl.
Well,
like,
that's cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. Go to LA, wild, you know, people are taking photos of me. My business is popping off. Everything was amazing. And then what do? I like completely drop it. Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. Like, and you know what? Your unconscious mind is so powerful, right? So the unconscious mind is not going to come in and be like, you're sabotaging yourself. No, your unconscious mind is going to tell you, this isn't where you should be. There's better things. Maybe you're supposed to change. You're not actually happy, blah, 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 all the things, right? Just like when you're trying to diet and lose weight, the unconscious mind tells you, oh, you need a cheat meal today, right? And it tells you all these things. Why? Because you're about to surpass your like ceiling, or as like Gay Hendricks says, your upper limiting. So it's like we all have this like ceiling and this limit of how happy we can be, how hot we can be, how wealthy and all the things. And then the minute that you start to like go above it, it's the unconscious mind's natural tendency to bring you back down to comfort, right? This stems from like caveman days. Like, you know, you're in the cave, you got your tribe. Why would you go out there, right?
Yeah. So
it was like, again, it felt so uncomfortable to this like little girl who grew up with like absolutely nothing. You know, there were times in my childhood where like we had no money. My mom would like pretend that we're doing like candlelight dinners, but no, like the electricity is cut off, you know? And like she was just terrible with money management.
Yeah.
And so it was just like so much for that version of me. And I dropped it. I just started working on referrals. I started acting at that point. I went back to school and university, and I was working on referrals and everything was fine. And in that year, probably about a year later, I was like kicking myself in the ass. I was like, fuck, you literally sabotaged everything that you had built. And it was huge. And it's not until last month that I finally like actually fully busted out of it, which is why June was like a huge month for me.
Really?
Yeah, and I recorded this like video crying and I didn't post it, but it was just like last month was like I finally went beyond what I'd been trying to get, but it was more than that. It was about like finally moving beyond and actually allowing myself to be happy and loved and deserving and all the things. And it was like a huge testament of like my growth and where I am, and it was just really big.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, and then let's get into what happened in Canada.
Oh, yeah. Left. So, like, can we talk freely?
Yeah. It's my damn show, yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, then, yeah. So I basically, like, and I hate this word because...
And real quick, sorry to cut you off, but I want to get into, like, your it's crazy to me, like, especially you, but even other people that have just, like, so much faith in, like, God or whatever you want to call it, that, like, you just trust, like, a whim feeling off that. So, like, yeah, like, I want to get into that right now with you.
Right now?
Yeah.
The God thing? We're going to do
all that
the
stuff.
God
No,
thing?
but all that stuff, like, how you just, like, trust God and all that stuff, and how you left Canada and now you're in Mexico. I mean.
I know, yeah. I don't know, like, I just feel like my life could have been way worse. You know, I used, you know, I was working in a bar, strip club, to be honest, and I was a shooter girl. Could have totally been a stripper. Was a shooter girl, and I had this like guy follow me into the office, lock the door, push me against the wall, start taking my pants off, and the bouncer like immediately like came in and like was ready to like beat the shit out of this guy.
Yeah.
And because I was like their like prized shooter girl, like just imagine I'm having these like really intense conversations with these guys. They're loving me. They're just like buy all these shots. I'm like sarcastic.
They probably
like,
saw you go into the back and were waiting for you to come out. So like, what the hell is she doing back there for that long?
I know. They're just like, they loved me, you know, because I was not like that ditzy, like whatever. I was just like, yo, like what's going on? Like, let's chat. So I was like their prize shooter girl. Like they got to protect the shooter girl. But I feel like there were so many moments that things could have gone way worse, you know? Like I feel like as much as I feel like I've gone through a lot in my life, because we haven't even talked about the fact that my dad died and all these things. I feel so blessed. Yeah. Like what a beautiful life I've had truly up until now, like honestly. And even like, I think all of us have the most beautiful lives. Like to me, being human is the entire spectrum. It's so funny, right? We get in these like, we're like, I'm going to be human and I need to be happy all the time. And it's like, no, you fucking don't. Like, you're here to be human. You're here to feel. So the lowest of lows, like the lowest that you can feel, the worst pain in the world, the more that you actually allow yourself to feel like the pain and the depth of everything that you've been through, understand that that's the, like now the opposite, the like, you know, the paradox or whatever, the duality is that now you get to feel even more love. So if you choose not to feel the pain, you're not feeling love. If you don't feel the pain, you don't feel the pleasure, right? It's like your life right now, if we're being super honest, your life probably wouldn't feel, and you've shared that like you've been like super grateful for the life now, you would not have that kind of gratitude if you didn't spend 12 years in jail.
Yeah, I'd probably like, I have a decent house and I live in a cool neighborhood, but that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and you wouldn't have, whereas like, and you know, I was telling you, like, I'm like flying first class and I'm just like crying on the plane because I'm just so grateful because of everything I've been through. So it's like, to me, we have to stop looking at life like it has to be a certain way and it has to go this way. It's like, no, it's meant to be highs and lows and happy and sad and angry and all of those things. Like, how beautiful is it that we get to literally feel like our hearts like crack open and truly feel what it is to be human? Like, what a blessing, you know? So I've just always felt so grateful. And like, I am someone, like, I feel my pain. Like, I've had moments like in my life where, like, I'm not kidding you, I'm like lying on the floor just like in the most pain I've ever felt. Like, I've been suicidal, I've had like really hard times, you know, and I'm grateful for all of it. Like, I would not change any of it.
For sure.
So yeah, I've just always had this like beautiful trust in God, like, and I feel God's presence all the time. It just feels so loved.
Did he start sending you messages or what, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, when it was time to go from Canada? Or
Yeah, well, that was like really interesting because part of my ego kept me in Canada for a long time because I was fighting what was going on very publicly, and it was bringing me a lot of followers. Had my entire account deleted as well because of how vocal I was. And
welcome
I was
to the club.
I know, like I was like going maskless and all those things, and some masked up person decided to report me and delete me. And it was so funny because I was launching a new like business, like I was like launching a new program, and I'm like, I go to open up my Instagram and I'm like meant to make a bunch of money that week and it's gone. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're getting, and what's funny is like a month before, God kept telling me, delete all those posts, like delete all your posts. I had like 600 Instagram posts. Don't negotiate with God. Like, when God says move, you move. When God says jump, you jump. So what do? I'm with my girlfriends. We're deleting like all my posts on a Sunday. And my girlfriend's like, you can't delete all of them. Like, keep like some. So I kept like 55 posts, you know, but God was telling me like, no, delete all of it. Like, I want to build a new slate with you. Cause I'd found like Christ recently, and it was like rebuilding my life through Christ. Right. And of course I'm like, no, I'm not going to delete them all. What happens a week later? Deleted.
Really?
Yeah. My whole account's gone. Cause God's like, you didn't fucking listen.
No
you know?
way.
Like, I know that had I have deleted everything and just started, cause like, I felt like God wanted like a clean slate,
He's
you
like,
know?
you didn't fucking listen.
Yeah, like, I know, that's how God talks to me, like, bitch, what are you doing?
Yeah,
you know?
right.
So,
Wow. Yeah. Here's no account. How's that?
Yeah, basically, you got to start fresh now. And it's fine. I started it, but so I was a freedom fighter. I was organizing protests. I started a nonprofit during that time. I started being known all over Ottawa and Toronto as well. I was like going maskless, getting kicked out of stores, filming it all. So people were literally witnessing how I was being treated. And it was really stressful. Like, I couldn't even go do groceries. And because it wasn't as bad in the US as it was in Canada. Like, it was like nowhere. Like, you wear a mask, you are not allowed in, nothing. It was intense. So like, I'd be the only person in the store without a mask. I'd have like guys in bike suits be like, excuse me. And I'd look back and like, I have a lot of attitude. And I'm like, do you work here?
Yeah.
And like, he'd be like, you are reckless and you are selfish. I'm like, you don't fucking, like, I'd just be like, whatever, man.
Yeah.
But then I'm such a sensitive person and it's so stressful. Like, you're literally in fight or flight all the time. My friends got completely beat up to the point that they went to a hospital because they were maskless and unvaxxed in a pizza store, you know? It's like actually terrifying. One of the big freedom fighters, Chris Guy, he got arrested, I don't even know how many times, because he was like publicly speaking. I was publicly speaking at a few protests too, and it's like he would get arrested, he'd be prevented from doing that. I was just such a big freedom fighter. And at one point, we had been talking, like my ex-husband and I, and a couple friends and I, like to leave, because we're just like, okay, we have two choices. We're like, we can keep fighting this, but a lot of us felt like nobody else was fighting. It felt like no one's fighting beside you. Like, you're kind of alone, you know? Like, no, when I started my nonprofit, everyone like messaged me, we've been waiting for someone to do this.
Really?
That's the energy, right? Everyone's just like waiting for somebody else to do it. And it's like, no, you actually need to go do it yourself, you know? And I was just tired. Like, I would go to the gym in my hotel in Toronto, and a guy, some like beta guy would walk in with his girlfriend. 2 minutes later, security would be in and he'd be like, oh, you're not allowed to be here. There's only supposed to be 4 of you in here. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, did you go and tell security? Because again, I'm very like confrontational kind of, but like still kind. Like I'm very kind and loving. And he's
saying in a nice voice, did you go tell security?
No, I'm like, then my voice, I'm like, did you go tell security? You
Accent's gone and everything?
Yeah, now I'm like, I mean business. And he's like, yeah, you're supposed to be wearing a mask. All this bullshit. And then I'm looking at the security guard and I'm like, I'm arguing with him because I'm like, who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then this guy's on the treadmill. I'm like, go lift a weight, buddy. Please. Right. And he's on the treadmill and he's like.
Probably just walking on the treadmill.
Yeah, he was just walking on the treadmill like a beta.
Yeah.
C-U-C-K.
Yeah,
and he's like yelling at me to stop yelling, like to stop discussing with the security guard. But the security guy we had a good vibe. Like even though we're like arguing a little bit, like it was all love. Then some other guy jumps in to be like, yo, would you just let her have her conversation?
No way.
So we leave. I leave. I realize I forgot something. I go back in and I'm like ready to like tear this guy apart. Yeah. And then it just like came through like, it's just not worth it. Like it's not like, and there were times where it was, but anyways, like it was just intense. So basically like the final straw, 1 week, I'm doing groceries, literally not harming anyone, nothing. Some like older lady is like staring at me and I'm like, can I help you? And she's like, you should be wearing a mask. And I'm like, do you work here? No, but I'm like, then you have literally nothing to say. And I walk away. She goes and gets the manager and I'm standing in line and my anxiety is like running high. I'm live on Instagram, always to like protect myself because these people are crazy. Yeah. I go in the car, start bawling and I'm like, I can't fucking do this anymore. I go to Walmart a few days later. Some lady literally is following me, like right behind me. And I'm like, get 6 feet back. Like, what are you doing? You need to wear a mask. She's yelling. Everyone is around us. I'm filming it. I'm shaking. She's filming me. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm filming you, blah, 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 all these things. She was an employee. Finally, the manager comes and he gets mad at her. He's like, what are you doing to her? And she's like, she's not wearing a mask, nah, nah, nah. And I was like, I have an exemption. I didn't, but I have an exemption. That video got me in a lot of trouble, actually. Ultimately, he's like, he comes and looks at me. He's like, are you okay? And I start bawling and I'm live. So many people send me messages. Oh, what a loser. You started crying at the end of the video. I'm like, fuck you. It's called a release. One girl's like, an orgasm is a release. I'm like, get out of here, you know? But it's like, of course I'm gonna start crying. He's this like big man here to like kind of like save me from this like person who's attacking me. I start crying. She ends up getting fired. And I shared about that. Now they've started Twitter threads against me with photos of me, where to find me, where I live, threatening my life. And I'm sitting at my girlfriend's cottage. It's probably like the Saturday night. And I'm texting my ex-husband and I'm like, look at this. And he's like, I told you, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be speaking out publicly. And I'm like, yo, I'm with God. I will die. Like, I will die for this stuff. I will die before you vaccinate me. I will die before I do any of these things. Like, that's it. Like, that's who I am. I will die for this. I don't care. Like, whatever, like, put a gun to my head. Fucking shoot me. You know what I mean? Like, okay, there's a Twitter thread, great. Like, but it's still, I was like under threat. And if I didn't have my son, I would have stayed in Canada and would have fought this thing truly until I was in jail. Honestly. Like it, you know? But because of my son, it's like I have to think of him. And like, mommy is not a good mommy when she's like stressed out and there's Twitter threads by these like blue-haired liberal people yelling at me all the time. And so that point, that day, when that whole thing happened, I messaged my ex and I was crying and I'm like, I want to leave. And I sent him the video and he was like, he felt it and he's like, okay, let's go.
Wow, that's cool. He had your back like that.
Yeah, and in a week we were gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and because we'd been waiting, we'd been talking about it. And he kept saying, wait until after the election, wait until this. But after that moment, he was like, all right, let's go. And so we were 3 of us, our other friend 2. The Saturday night, we're like booking our flights, and we were supposed to go to Texas. And at the last minute, it was like, no, we're not going there. We're going to Mexico. And that was like the most transformational thing ever for me. But yeah, like I'm glad he like wants me to be a good mom. He knows that you're not a good, like, it's just stressful, you know?
It's crazy. You live in Mexico and you don't even speak Spanish. I think I speak more Spanish than you too, which is actually
really
hilarious
bad.
too.
It's super embarrassing. I keep telling myself every day, I'm like, I don't even want to go see some of the people that like my nail girl. Like
Yeah.
I haven't seen her in like 4 weeks, so she's expecting me to know more Spanish and I don't. It's like it's actually embarrassing.
He's like, I'm back with hola, and that's all I got for
Yeah,
you today. I can say
basically.
adios when we're done here, though.
You know, I know a little bit more than that, but like truly not much more. So I need to hire someone.
Okay.
It's
So
fine.
how's another thing I do want to get into that we didn't know about too is that you are sober.
Yeah, so like not from addiction
For sure.
perspective, but yeah, I
But
don't
this
drink.
my same guest last week was the same thing. I don't like addicts need to be sober because we have to or we're gonna die. Other people, I want to like influence the rest of the public that's not addicts to still get sober because you can find so many more benefits in it. And like I feel like a lot of those people once they do it, they're gonna be like, why would I go back to drinking? You know, so that's
Yeah.
I want to get into that.
Yeah, so I've like since
You're
I
not
was
in trouble for not being an addict on my show.
okay. Like, oh, dang
Damn it, I'm in
should've-
trouble again.
Should have added that to
Yeah.
my repertoire of things I've been through. That was surprisingly something that never happened to me, and it's because I think I knew my dad was addicted to heroin and crack, and he was an alcoholic, and my mom had like a pretty like dodgy relationship with alcohol. We couldn't say that she was like alcoholic per se, but like when she drank, she drank.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it was like, and she'd like punch her boyfriend type thing. It was just like really intense.
Yeah.
My mom's friends were like, we hate your mom when she's
I was
drunk.
a mean drunk too. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, like she just like, it just wasn't, you know. So I never liked that and I never liked being around that. But again, I've always been super spiritual. My girlfriends would take me out to clubs and like, they would laugh. They'd be like, Kelsey's gonna be in and out within 5 minutes. I'd be at the bar. Some guy would come like start saying some bullshit. I'd literally go like this, like. and
Don't
then-
even try, bro.
Yeah, and then like, I'd look at my girlfriends. I'd do like one walk around. I'm like, I'm going home. They'd be like, what is wrong? I'm like, I can't. Like, I just can't. Something always felt off with me. And then when I did drink, I would get like super drunk. And it would be like I wouldn't even be drinking a lot. My friends were like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, why are you
No
like
tolerance.
throwing up out of the taxi, like
Yeah.
embarrassingly drunk, you know? So I was just like, this is not for me. And I didn't like it. And I would feel super depressed afterwards. So I didn't enjoy that. And like, I've always, when I was like probably 20, I started like, you know, when I was 17, I started smoking pot after my mom died. That was like really like how I coped with it for a lot. And the guy that I was dating, he was like, he smoked pot all day. So I was smoking a lot then, but I stopped because it gave me a lot of anxiety. And then, so I wasn't really drinking. I went years. Plus I was like bodybuilding. I was super lean, like truly I was like shredded. So I would just go out, I drink water. Part of it was like, I hated how it made me feel. You know, I hated the way that it made me look. I didn't like it. And then when I converted to Islam, I went like literally 4 years without like having any alcohol. I would do shrooms sometimes, things like that, like psilocybin, and I would always do it. Like people would laugh. I'd do it like alone in my apartment to get like spiritual downloads. You know what I mean? Yeah, and then there's been like little moments where I've had friends in my life where they're like cocktail girls and stuff like that. And there was a while ago, like maybe last year, where I thought like maybe I could be like a one cocktail type thing, but I started getting a lot of like autoimmune issues after my divorce. And this year in Mexico, I started seeing this like literally the most amazing naturopath in the world. Like everyone who comes to Mexico, even on a trip, I'm like, you need to go see her. She's so incredible. And she's looking at everything. And she like literally just did it from my like vibration and you know, like no blood work, no nothing, just fully my vibration. She was able to tell me things that have been going on for my whole life. She knew everything that I was telling her. And she's like, you're allergic to alcohol. She's like, that's why you don't vibe with it at all.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like on another level of it, like because it always was a conscious choice of mine. Our society really does push caffeine and alcohol. I'm 100% a coffee addict, and I watched a video the other day, and it's like probably one of the worst addictions for us. But so our whole society
Coffee is?
Oh, it's terrible.
Really?
Like, oh yeah, I'll send you the video. It's wild.
Okay.
It's just so hard to quit because like entrepreneur and you're working and things like that, and you really do have to like the like down of it is like 2 weeks. But this is our society, right? They push you to get a job that you hate, to pay for things that do absolutely nothing for you, just to like show off. Then they push you to have like coffee in the morning.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they push you to drink on weekends. And then that causes you to go in this like really weird like depressive cycle because A, you're hungover, you name it, you can't do anything. And then you're back to work on Monday. And then they've got you like addicted to porn and TV and all of these things. So
And
it's
bad
just,
food, you couldn't believe like all the fast food. Remember, you were trying to find food.
yeah.
I was like, you're gonna be able to find nothing except fast food around
Yeah,
here.
this is wild. And then the food. So it's like, again, everyone is just like, it's the matrix. It's the system. They want you sick and overweight and addicted and drinking and depressed and on their medication because Big Pharma makes more money than anything in the entire world. And we can go on a super deep level too. Like Big Pharma, the sign for Big Pharma is literally the sign of the high occult. Like it's like Big Pharma runs the whole world,
For sure.
you know? So it's just like, I don't want to be part of any of that. And I feel so much better. Like, I feel so good. Like I'm clear-headed.
Don't you notice it's cool? I definitely noticed it, but a lot of people, like, they get jealous when they see that you're not drinking and you're out at a bar or something like that. They're like,
Yeah.
damn, how can you do that? I wish I could do that, you know?
It's like, you can.
It's like, you can just do it, bro.
Yeah,
you know
just
what I'm
don't
saying?
drink.
But that's why I like this, because a lot of people think that they don't need to stop if they're not an addict or something like that. And it's like anybody can do it, and you'll find so much more benefits than anything. Alcohol's just trash. It's seriously, it's literally poison for your body. It does nothing good for you.
No.
So yeah, I'm a big fan against that stuff.
It lowers your vibe. Like, it's like
Everything. It just dumbs you down as a person and makes you fat.
Yeah, and energetically, like, it truly is like very low vibrational. So if you are a conscious spiritual person vibing really high, you drink alcohol, like, that brings you right down. Like, it is a depressant, you know?
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like, I feel so much better without it. My body it causes so much inflammation too. Like, anyone who has autoimmune, like, I was diagnosed with like autoimmune stuff. I'm like, no, that's like, I can heal that. You can heal all of this through like diet and exercise and stress and healing your trauma. Everything comes from like energetic stuff and the things that we ingest. So it's like, if you have any of these autoimmune stuff, they're like, cut alcohol out of your life, cut alcohol, cut wheat, literally just start eating beef all day. You will clear like the majority of your issues.
For sure. Cool.
It's
I like
crazy.
that. Last stuff I want to get into too. Now it's just like your life now, and how good does it feel to like know like all the dreams you're like chasing and like taking the chances, because clearly it's paying off now. I can see you're doing very well. So just like, and how rewarding is that when you do that? And then like, how much do you think back like, God, what if I wouldn't have taken the chance?
Yeah.
You know, because I have that thought almost every day.
Yeah. And it's so good. And it's like so good for anyone who's doing that right now. Like, it's a you versus you game, right? And a lot of us have this already in us, but like, I'm here to be the best version of myself in every single way. I'm here to like consistently be better in relationships and communication and business and marketing and sales, in being a mom, in my body, and everything is just like growth oriented. And it's so beautiful. You know what I mean? It's like, first of all, what would be the point of my life if I wasn't living it this way? You know, like, I feel like it'd be so mundane, so boring. Mm-hmm. Like, we need to be working towards something. Even, you know, I'm huge on like the masculine feminine dynamics. Like, the masculine within all of us is purposeful. It's a king. He's working, he's living on the edge. He's striving for new things. He's pushing himself. Also, when we go deep into it, like, God, the universe is consistently expanding. Like, consistently, it's like the universe is just, it never stops expanding. So as human beings, we're literally here to have a desire, reach the desire, expand into a new desire, get the desire. So like, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, like, literally wants to love you and give you what you want, because that's the only way that the universe can continue to expand. So those desires in your heart, those things that you want, like, you're meant to work for them. And then the minute that you get them, people are like, oh, it's like this, like, it never ends. It's not meant to. The minute that you get that desire, the minute that you get that thing, like, you're meant to want more. It's part of human like conditioning. And again, those new things, like, God consistently tells me, it's not about the business you're building. It's not about the acting, because I love acting. It's not about any of these things. It's about who you need to become to build that thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, you want to build this physical business? Great. You're going to have to drop your bad habits, drop the sleeping around with toxic girls, drop the drama, drop this, drop all the things that are actually really terrible for you to be able to make this happen. God doesn't care about this. He cares that you just became the best version of yourself. So it's like, for me, that's like all I'm constantly thinking about is like, how am I growing? And yeah, to hit these things is so beautiful. One of the things that I do practice is really maintaining neutrality, because like, okay, you're like, okay, I want to hit like $10,000 per month. The problem is that like, you think that it's going to bring you happiness. Okay, like anyone who's listening.
It does at first, but it only lasts so long.
Yeah, no, and like, so anyone who's listening to this, it's like, okay, what do you think $10,000 a month is going to bring you? Let's say you're not doing that, and let's say you're doing way more. I'm like, kudos, buddy, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. But let's say those who aren't yet at 10, what do you think it's going to bring you? First answers, maybe it's freedom, peace, happiness, all the things. Understand that if you think that this thing over here, this money, is going to bring you those things, and you are not already feeling them, then it means that you are not a vibrational match to this thing. Whereas if you drop, you're like, oh, it's just money. It literally does absolutely nothing for me, which is like super weird. But you're just like, oh, it literally won't change a thing. And for anyone who's like gotten the dream body, gotten the dream partner, gotten the wealth, whatever, you do recognize that it like literally changes nothing within your physical being. Like, it doesn't make you feel better. It doesn't make you feel anything. So when you do that, you like neutralize the vibration, and then you become a match for it. So I try to like okay, yeah, I hit like heavy numbers last month, and it's like I literally just like breathed through it and was like, this is just normal. Like not letting like anything shift, because then it's like, okay, those bigger numbers that I want, like it feels the exact same as right now. Like nothing is going to change in my life, whether I have it or don't. That is like the most powerful place to be, because you literally do become the creator of your reality. And then this is where all these things that are truly just reflections of you, like all these desires that you want in this physical world, they're just reflections of you. We live in a hologram. Like they just they come into, you know, it's perfect, like in alignment, and it comes easier. So it's super rewarding. It feels good. But the biggest thing that I can say is like, don't make it about the thing that you achieve. Make it about like the reward of like who you had to become for this thing, right? Like the fact that like you allowed yourself to have more, or the fact that you allowed yourself to like do the discipline and do the things and show up consistently, because these things, like, it's not about that. And again, it just makes it so much easier to get these things when it's just an inner game and a you game.
Wow, I love that. Last little bit of advice here. I usually try and tell people to like give some advice for dudes that are locked up in prison or something like that. But one thing I like look at with your story too, and I'm like, I need to get more like for sure spiritual. And like, I still like want to ask you when you're like, God told me this. I'm like, how the hell did he tell you to, you know? So like, what's a little bit of advice that people can get more in touch with that, or just with anything in life? Your little last shout out right here though. Yeah.
Like connect with yourself. You know, I think that most people are so busy. They're so like connected to their phone, their friends. They're looking for everything outside of themselves. And it's like, literally just like listen to your heart, like connect with your heart, like look in the mirror, do mirror work, like ask yourself, like, how do you feel today? What do you want? Why aren't you being disciplined? Why did you not go to your workout? Things like that. And you'll hear the answer from within, and like you're connecting. And it's like, is God really separate from us, or is it just inside of us? Like when I say God talks to me, God tells me, like you're not hearing things or whatever. It's like you're just feeling it, right? Like God is a whisper. The devil yells, God is a whisper. So that loud voice in your head that's like doubting you and all the things, not God.
That's a good one right there. Okay.
Sorry.
Wow, cool. No, you're good.
Yeah, you know, so just like listen to that tiny little whisper. And also God is always expanding, and it's going to be less about this and more about this. So again, like I truly believe, like if you're looking for their approval, their acceptance, this, whatever that is, that's the enemy. That's not God. It's always like an inner game. You turn it in. That's it. Connect with yourself. Obviously I have to cough like right now at this last moment.
Oh, you're good.
I'm like, it's not COVID.
Even if it is, I ain't scared.
I'm like, here, come here. Yeah. Connect with yourself. You know, self, I write it on my stories all the time, capital S, that thing within you that's bigger than all things, the thing that's within me, within you, within Robin, within the trees, the birds, all things. Connect with that part of you. You will never be led astray.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, all the way from Mexico. Everybody go look her up. We'll put all her information in the comments here, but thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
It's a totally different story too. I feel like my viewers are going to get a lot from this. So thank you so much for making the trip all the way from Mexico.
Yes, thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it. Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias. Hasta luego.
That was pretty smooth. All right, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Roll Call with Chappie. Thank you again, Kelsey, for making the trip from Mexico. See you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and leave us some feedback. We would love to know what you think. You can find everything discussed in this episode and more in our show notes below or petermeyerhoff.com. I am Peter Meyerhoff, and you've been listening to the Roll Call with Chappie podcast.